So my name is Aynne Kokas. I'm an assistant professor of media studies. I've met a lot of you. I haven't met all of you. I primarily teach courses on digital media and East Asian media. Though actually after the Sony Hack, I've been kind of increasingly interested in this question of media and internet security. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the interview and a little bit about the Sony Hack. So most of you have probably heard on the tabloids in December 2014 about the Sony Hack. The reason that it became really significant in the popular press was because we heard things like how Channing Tatum responded to his studio emails with things like gigantic bolded emails, and we heard about Amy Pascal, the head of Sony, calling Angelina Jolie a couple of bad names in print. So this was tabloid fodder, which really is kind of distinctive when we think about questions of internet security. So a lot of times this is the sort of thing that occurs. Internet security occurs in like IT rooms, and it's not necessarily a part of the public consciousness. So today what I'm going to be talking about is the ways in which the Sony Hack and the publicity surrounding the interview actually brought to light a lot of these issues, not just for people who are concerned with internet security, but also for people who read tabloid newspapers who go on gossip websites, and how that actually was a particularly significant moment in our understanding and appreciation of this issue of cybersecurity. So Sony hacked again. The 2012 or the 2014 hacking was not the first. There were also two. So one that kind of got a little bit of short shrift was the December 25th hacking of Sony PlayStation. So how many of you heard about the PlayStation hacking? Okay, maybe a couple of gamers over here. It's okay, you were like, Christmas, PlayStation, what? Understandable. And then the non-gamers didn't raise their hands. So even though the one that was the most, and this is actually really instructive because the interview was this kind of major commercial property, and the Sony hacking was major fodder for gossip rags. So in some ways, this underscores how when we see this kind of large group, of very popular content coming out, this indicates the ways in which there's increased public awareness. Whereas for the December 25th hacking, the only people who were really kind of acutely aware of it were people in computer security and gamers, who sometimes are an overlapping group as well. So just to think about the fact, and then Sony also had a 2011 hack that they apparently didn't quite do enough updating from, and hence the two big hacks in December 2014. So this isn't just an isolated incident, but the way in which it was covered by the media is a really significant incident.
You know, people say that...
So just to kind of get us all on the same page, for those of you who haven't seen the interview, which is some of you, here's the trailer.
Living a lie. Okay, Rob, when you're ready.
Get ready, camera 2.
Oh, Jesus. Whoa.
His head looks like somebody's taint.
You barely look different. Thanks, man.
Come on!
We've been together for 1,000 episodes!
Congratulations on 1,000 hours of being a massive sellout. What do you mean?
Welcome to Flavor Town, bitches.
Keep ruining America. You're the worst.
He's peanut butter and jealous.
What is there to be jealous of?
They hate us because they ain't us.
They don't hate us because they hate us.
They hate us because they ain't us.
Stop saying that.
Haters gonna hate, and ain'ters gonna ain't.
That is not an actual thing people say. Every night, millions of people watch our show. I just want to cover actual news, not Nicki Minaj's vagina flopping out at the Grammys.
You don't like that brown sugar?
Has nothing to do with brown sugar.
Aaron, look at this.
Kim Jong-un wants to do an interview with Dave Skylark?
He's a fan. Look at him. If that ain't a real story, what is?
Okay, let's do it.
I'm going in on Korea!
And buffering. But you guys get the idea. So that's really the most important. No, you want to wait to see if it buffers?
It'll probably take too long.
Yeah, it's the most important thing. Like the most important thing came through, which was the fact that the interview is actually a meta commentary about gossip and news, and the fact that actually what really people think about most is these kind of very trivial questions about, Rob Lowe's hair or Nicki Minaj at the Grammys, rather than kind of more significant geopolitical questions. Now this really interesting meta phenomenon occurred that when the interview actually was part of the Sony hacking, because it was this extremely significant pop culture phenomenon, people actually started paying attention to issues of internet security. So we have this story about these two entertainment journalists who are now going to be trying to cover Kim Jong-un in this kind of significant geopolitical moment that actually turns into this very popular hyper commercialized film, helping people reflect on kind of bigger geopolitical issues. So it's this kind of interesting little interplay. I mean, the movie itself had some merits if you like the Judd Apatow style of direction. It, you know, has been critiqued for being quite racist as well as pretty sexist. So, you know, it's interesting that we're taking this as our example of something to kind of hang the American free speech hat on. But that's, you know, that's another issue entirely that we won't be talking about today. But the part that's really significant is the fact that we had this immediate moment where we wanted to find out who was responsible. So these types of hacks happen all the time. But very rarely, are the hacks reported in the news. Sometimes they are, like for example, Target, Anthem recently had a really big hack. But even more rarely does the CIA or does the FBI come out and say, like, these are the people responsible. And because it had to do with Seth Rogen and Judd Apatow and like a December 25th release in the movie theaters, we had this moment where the FBI was actually opening up a current investigation and sharing that information with consumers, because all of a sudden people cared what was going on. So in this particular case, you may have heard, you may not have heard, that the reason for the Sony hacking was traced back to an attack by the North Korean government because of the interview's kind of very incendiary scene in which Kim Jong-un dies. And it's a pretty, for those of you who haven't seen it, I didn't bring it here, but you know, it's like a living leader who's a sitting head of state being burst into flames. So it is a little bit incendiary. I mean, like, some of that really got elided in the debate. But one of the things that was significant was the way in which, during this investigation, there was this kind of immediate association with the North Korean government. Now, a lot of people, and still, have drawn into question whether or not this was actually what was going on, or if it was a move by the FBI to kind of tamp down discussion about these questions of cybersecurity. So, was it really the North Korean government? A lot of alternative news sources have posed the fact that it could very easily have also been, you know, another group from another group that was posing as the North Korean government, or another group of Koreans who were kind of given this, who were kind of associated with the North Korean government, or not even one of these groups at all. Another very plausible alternative is just the fact that it was a Sony employee who was very disgruntled. But in this kind of rush to identify a specific guilty party, there was this move toward identifying North Korea. And actually, a lot of the discussion about the interview and about the Sony hack only started to happen actually several months after the initial Sony hacking started. So this kind of discussion of the interview and this tabloid moment actually wasn't the first part of this hacking scandal. So these are all kind of significant, weird red herrings that are happening through this whole process, that are important to kind of take into consideration as alternative lines of inquiry. Now, what all of this comes back to, and one of the things that we can all learn from the Sony hack, as well as kind of from the public awareness that it generated, is this question of cloud security. And it's not necessarily a sexy area of exploration, because we don't like to think of computer security when we're just trying to go to the movies on December 25th. But ultimately, this is what it really brought out. Now, how many of you have, I see some engineers in this room, so this is going to be like really old hat for you guys. But so, how many of you who can name a type of cloud storage that they use? All right, yeah. So if you just want to, just bear with me, just toss out some names. So, like, what are some programs that you use that have cloud storage?
Amazon's the easy one.
Okay. Yeah, Amazon has like huge cloud servers. Who else can name something? A non-engineer. Yeah.
Is Apple like the Apple Cloud? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Apple. So
Taking a guess there.
right. Okay. So this is why we're trying to. So yeah. So Apple. So a lot of times Apple Cloud. You're storing. So what do you store in Apple Cloud?
So I don't use the cloud, but like I know you can put pictures
Okay.
and like you can like store everything that you would put on like your phone or your computer into cloud,
Okay.
and then it's just there. And you can pick it up in like another spot.
Right. Yeah. So who here uses like Dropbox? So Dropbox is kind of a cloud storage platform where you're storing your files or uploading photos into Dropbox. Who uses Facebook and stores photos on Facebook? Okay, so you're then like storing your data in a cloud, and that was the problem with the Sony hack. But Sony is a large corporation, a large media and technology corporation that had a really long and embarrassing hack to their cloud servers. So if we think about this, if we think about the interview as a moment in which we can understand like the extreme vulnerability of even media and technology companies, let alone individuals, then this is a really significant moment of awareness that we can take advantage of to understand not only how much we're using cloud security or cloud facilities or cloud storage, but also how vulnerable we are. If even a large media and technology company like Sony had like months and months of email leaks, they weren't sure what was going on. Like they still, like if you read the FBI flash reports about this, they pretty much think it's North Korea, but like there's still some doubt. You know, I mean, we're dealing with like a lot of uncertainty here, and every person in this room who uses a cloud service has that same level of potential vulnerability. So we go from something like Judd Apatow and James Franco and Seth Rogen to actually thinking about some really serious stuff. And here, let me just go back to this quick definition. So for those of you who are kind of uncertain about this, so the cloud is terminology that refers to the utilization of computing services and capacity outside of your specific hardware. And cloud computing then relies on remote servers and software networks for centralized data storage and online access to computing services. So even though when we talk about the cloud, it's these, cloud like, these kind of climatological metaphors or even theological metaphors. Really what it is just gigantic server farms. So we have this relationship between things like this. So if we think about this, what level of physical security so server farms are actually located in very specific discrete areas that are physically vulnerable. So we have this kind of level of this issue with hacking, but we also have the physical vulnerability of specific cloud server farms. So this is where your data is being stored.
So imagine you have a dog.
This is just a quick additional overview of cloud computing for your reference.
You and Frank are best pals. You go on walks together, Frank always walks faster, but still, you really love Frank a lot. You only have one photo of Frank though, this goofy shot of Frank at his birthday party, drooling on the cake. And because you love this weirdly named dog so much, you're worried you might lose this photo. So you upload the photo, your favorite photo, to one of your favorite photo websites, like Flickr, Facebook, or Picasa. And without realizing it, you just started cloud computing. But what does that mean? When you put Frank's photo online, you could picture a giant cloud coming down to vacuum up this photo off your laptop. Then the photo of Frank, birthday hat and all, lives up in the cloud until you need to look at it again. You log onto Flickr or Facebook, and there's Frank. You can see him from wherever you want, from home, from work, even on your phone, in case you start missing Frank during your lunch break. At first, the cloud seems like magic, but it's not. The photo of Frank isn't flying around in the sky. Frank's photo actually lives in a secret warehouse full of computers. These warehouses are called data centers, or server farms, and they're popping up all over the world.
At least he finished his sentence.
No. And we were even talking about net neutrality. Just think about how much worse this would be if we were like paying for fast lane service. Or maybe Brown would pay for extra fast lane service for the presentations. I don't know.
Upgrade.
What?
We had a network upgrade.
Oh yeah. Oh no. You know what? One time I was doing a presentation that had like half video, and all the videos were buffering the entire time. It was basically like I'd be like, and now, and then it would just be like buffering. So this is nothing. Like you guys got the idea. So that's the most important thing. What? Oh, okay, all right. So let me tell you, I'll act it out. So basically, what happens with Frank is, like, Frank is then stored on these facilities, and it's, so the owner feels like really great about the fact that he knows where Frank is at all times, and there's not this level of uncertainty. But then, horror of horrors, he, the cloud, he realizes the insecurity of this cloud data, and the only photo of Frank that he has is actually erased on the cloud. And then, rather than having this level of security that he initially anticipated, he realizes that, the cloud is secure, but also has its insecurities. This is not really how I would have preferred this to go through. So we have this ability to store things in so many different places and store data in so many different places, but at the same time, there's this extreme vulnerability, both physical vulnerability and IT vulnerability that's kind of constantly part of our new experience of interacting with data. And that's something that we became more aware of as citizens through the interview, which we wouldn't have been able to guess. So ultimately, the Sony hack was really significant because it brought these cyber vulnerabilities to public awareness. And I would just urge all of you to take this moment and to take this as an opportunity to think about the different ways in which you store and interact with your data. How do you store data physically? How do you store it electronically? Who is storing your data? Which companies are storing your data? Which companies are sharing your data? And how does all of this ultimately work? Because if you're trusting your data to companies like Sony, which presumably that would be someone who would be relatively safe to trust your data with because they're a technology company, you would actually be sorely mistaken. If you're trusting your data to a company like Anthem, which is ultimately a healthcare company, which is a place where you would really want to trust your data, that is also an area of potential vulnerability. So as students, as people who are thinking critically about these issues, pay attention to who has your data. If you can, read your terms of service to see what people can do. I know no one reads the terms of service. It's like the terms of service. I feel like the terms of service are like this kind of the most evil thing in the 21st century that everyone just clicks through. Who's sharing your data? How are they sharing your data? Why are they sharing your data? And ultimately, how are you choosing to interact with that? And you can, make these big issues for the people who you're voting for, because you don't want to be on the other end of a Sony hack. Anyway, thank you very much for your time and attention. I would love to answer any questions or continue talking about this stuff, or anything related to the interview. If you had favorite scenes that you just kind of want to relive, or unfavorite scenes that you want to talk about.
So did they ever announce what the point of entry was on the Sony hack? Because they didn't figure out the source, but what the point of entry was? So they said the part that's interesting is they said that they figured out the actor, but then they kind of backpedaled as well. So in terms of, if you read the FBI flash reports up to now, they don't have the information. Or they haven't publicly released it. But the thing is, when they were actually releasing this, when they released the fact that they believed it was the North Korean government that was doing this, the investigation was still ongoing. So I spoke to some colleagues at the FBI who were working on the investigation, and it's like, oh, tell me. And they were like, oh, well, actually, we're not done yet. It's like, well, that doesn't really jive with the fact that you just told us what the outcome was. You're in the middle of this. And so also, when you think about this question of cybersecurity on the state level, this is something that's very new and very challenging for law enforcement agencies as well. So in addition to bringing public awareness, it also kind of created awareness for the law enforcement industry or agencies that they need to be aware of the fact that these can be potentially very public occurrences. And that not only do they have to do investigations, but now they also have to do PR about their investigations, which I think was a very significant change that occurred through this kind of big interview debacle.
lot of cloud websites like Flickr or Facebook, they're free for us. So I'm wondering who's paying for the setup of these servers in these warehouses, or whatever you call them.
No, that's a great question. So, so what does free mean in that particular case? So what are you as a consumer giving those websites?
Oh, does that have to do with ads? Is that how?
Okay, so they can actually see. So you can see ads and targeted ads. What other information or what other kind of payment might you be providing in this case?
I mean, in terms of the websites, just popularity of users.
Okay, so you may be making a website more popular. Does anyone else have any ideas about how these sites might not be totally free? Yeah.
Well, on Facebook, for example, they've got a lot of new things instituted, especially over the past couple of years where they have the Facebook credits to buy like stickers and stuff and use them in games and that kind of thing. So they get a lot of people playing the games, and the people who develop the games pay to be on Facebook with those games. And then for Flickr, I think there's also like a photo rights purchasing service that they offer that I'm sure the professional photographers pay into Flickr to use those services.
So are they sort of in website purchases that?
Yeah, so they're in website purchases that also matter. Yeah. What else might we not be sharing? Yeah.
I'm doing my research on this.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, I knew that there would be people who have been thinking about this. So yeah.
The biggest thing that they earn money on is analyzing the images that you're uploading and the status reports that you're making on Facebook, and tying that with the ID that they have on you. They can sell this to a couple large firms in microtransactions. And those firms, what they do is they look over all of this anonymized data to figure out profiles and what someone like you would be likely to enjoy as well. So for instance, if you upload a lot of images of penguins and monster trucks, then and for some inexplicable reason there's a lot of people like you on Flickr, then these agencies will be able to determine that there's a correlation between the two. And so if they find someone else running a search on penguins, then they might push more advertisements for monster trucks to determine that relationship. It's a ridiculous example, but that's like actually how it works, and it's why Google has a 93% of its the money that it makes comes from selling your data for this purpose.
So it's to give advertisers information about you so they can give you the most successful ads.
But not information about you, information or like anonymized information about people like you.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So essentially, yeah. So this is can I build on that example? Okay. So for example, there was a scandal about Target sending. Oh yeah. Okay. So Target sent an email to this family or to this teenage girl's address, suggesting products for her new pregnancy. And the dad got the email and like.
I think it was a magazine.
Or was it a magazine? Oh.
Yeah, and they were trying to be discreet, so like it was a magazine with a bunch of other stuff, and then like 5 pages were like cribs and baby strollers.
But it was from Target, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe so the dad saw it and was like super angry. Yeah. Super angry. And he was like, "How dare you like target my daughter in this way?" And then it came out that the daughter was actually pregnant. And
it only took 5 factors.
Yeah, so I know 2 of them were prenatal vitamins and non-scented lotion, which apparently you when you're in your first, Camille might be able to. Sorry, sorry, man, that was totally inculpable.
Very obvious.
Yeah. But apparently in your first trimester, like you can't, like certain smells are very difficult, and you're also taking prenatal vitamins in order to.
Yeah, but another one was like large handbags for some reason.
Oh, okay. But essentially, I mean, this kind of very personal information can be generated from having limited amounts of data. And if we think about the amount of data that we're sharing with with all of these cloud services, and the fact that they're also vulnerable in these ways, it's really kind of an interesting, 21st century dilemma that we're encountering, because it's not like it's not like I'm urging you to give up Facebook or stop using Google Docs, because that's tricky to do. But how do you ultimately kind of think about what type of responsibility you're giving to corporations that have access to your data? So when we think about free material, like, if 93% of Google's revenue comes from your data, or ad revenue comes from your data, then that's not free. Like, you're actually you're sharing something very valuable. Yeah, Camille.
How much do they mine your emails for keywords?
Do you like to say that?
I wrote this paragraph like 3 days ago. I had my thesis draft due last Wednesday.
Well, this is a great topic. Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, when Gmail was first released in 2009, I think, it was a really cool idea, because instead of having like 50 megabytes of storage, it had 2 gigabytes. And people were really excited about this, especially internally in Google. But the thing was that they threw on their ad policy to Gmail itself, and critics were furious about it, because they were mining all of your Gmail information and serving ads directly related to it. And Google ended up having to sort of pull back a little bit on their behavior of that and sort of soften the advertisements. And now they don't really target it quite as directly. They sort of just add it to your add it to your personal file itself. Sort of so it's not directly targeted at the email. It's added to all the other information they have on you.
But it's not discount. It's not like it's separate, where there's this firewall where they're like, email's private, like this other, yeah.
They were the first ones.
Yeah.
So is it like if you're signed into Gmail and then you're using Chrome and stuff, then on Chrome you'll get ads that relate to stuff that you have in emails? Okay.
You can actually look at all the data they have on you. It's really cool.
You can?
Yeah, Google's probably the best at doing this. There's a really short link, I forgot what it was.
Yeah, I don't remember.
That you can go to, and you can look at all of the information they have from every single Google service that you use. So you can look at, if you have an Android smartphone, you can go look at where you've logged on to Wi-Fi over the past 5 years.
That's so
and a lot of
yeah.
Really serious.
So cool.
So thinking about these services as free, I mean, you aren't necessarily paying money directly, but they're not free.
And if I could actually just make one point.
Yeah, please.
One other thing to think of. No, because I've been saying all these horrible things about Google.
Yeah.
And that.
Yeah, are you going to work for them?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I started this thesis before I interviewed with Google.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, but I've said all these awful things about Google, but the other thing to take into account is 93% of their money comes from advertisements and all this data. But the thing to take into account is Google also leads all these other projects on free internet in the deserts of Australia and large sections of Africa, and water provided to huge areas. And back when the flu swept through 2 years ago, they within a day created a system for identifying where the flu was breaking out and alerting you so that you knew about this. And so a lot of these services that they're providing don't make them money, but because they have this large foundation with advertisement that makes up most of their backbone, they're able to offer these huge numbers of really, really great services for free. So it's sort of sketchy practices, but at the same time, they're doing a lot of really good stuff while doing this sort of awful thing to support it.
So the important upshot of all of this is that, just when we see these kind of moments of public awareness of data security, then this is a great time to take a step back and to think about what our own personal investment is in all of these issues. So, yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for all of your that's awesome. I'm so excited about your topic.
So I do believe there is still food. If you're possibly still hungry.
I'm sort of curious. What is the point of entry question?